Today on Videos for No One, chords in 8 channels or less. This is going to be kind of a slapdash informal overview of how I solve one specific problem, the many ways I solve one specific problem, because a lot of people ask me about this weird little thing, the Dirtywave M8, and rather than going exhaustively over every single function and like the start to finish process of creating music, I figure a better way for people to assess whether it's their thing is to see the process and the headspace involved when solving like problems that come up frequently. So for those of you who don't know, this is heavily modeled on the Game Boy tracker software Little Sound DJ, but instead of being limited to 4 channels, each of which can basically only produce a single type of sound, this thing has 8 channels, and all of them can independently host a bunch of different synthesizer engines. So that gives us a lot of ways and a lot of inroads to getting a lot done with a single channel. So first one, Wave Paraphonic. So Wave Paraphonic is part of the Synth engine. Let me find it here. And stock, it's basically just playing a power chord. The color parameter changes the chord that it plays. Negative values are minor chords, positive values are major chords, and the timbre parameter changes the oscillators that are used to make the sound. So in cases where you don't care a lot about the precise voicing of your chord, or the voicing just happens to line up with one that's provided here, you can use the color command alongside your notes to change the chord on the fly and get something like this. And so being able to spam 7th chords on a single channel instead of having them take up 4 channels leaves you a lot of space to do other stuff. Yay. It's also really well suited to power chords where the voicing is kind of just the thing that it is. You can see here that this is literally just like stock with a little bit of reverb and amplified with a weird limiter mode. Again, if we take it back to clipping. Wow, distortion is easy! Sonic Spinball. Synth Plucked is an instrument that I don't fucking understand, but it's one of the only ones on the M8 with some built-in concept of actually holding multiple notes. That's not actually reverb, this is a totally dry instrument, it just, like, holds the notes. Wild concept, right? I don't really know how the fuck to use this, so put somebody on the screen who knows how to use this. Holy shit. I have snuck this into some work before, but for, like, really messy guitar stuff. And this one is pretty basic. Kill commands to cut some of these off early for some rhythmic variation. Amplify the shit out of it. Use an instrument table that re-triggers the instrument multiple times. That's the ret command at different pitches. This is the note column here. And you get that sort of strummed effect. Of course, it helps that I supplemented this with some FM as well. One of my absolute favorites, Hypersynth. Hypersynth is its own synth engine that is probably best to explain by just twiddling the knobs a little bit. It makes very nice chords. This is an incredibly straightforward way to get a ton of tones in a single channel sounding very full-bodied and pleasant, and so I abuse the shit out of it in everything because it's really fun. But it's worth noting that it can hold its own as a melodic instrument as well. The M8 has a 4-op FM synthesizer, which is really nice for making dentist drill noises. It offers a couple of different algorithms for mixing and modulating the 4 different tone generators. And if you just add them all together and don't have them modulate anything, what you get is 4 pure tones. And if you then wire up the pitch parameter on 3 of those tones to 3 of the different FM mods, you can hook up something like this. That unfortunately leaves 3 of the 4 mods totally accounted for. So in terms of mod parameters, you really only have 1 left, which I usually use for the feedback parameter, which makes the wave steadily more sawtooth-like in a way that I don't fully understand. But there are obviously a couple other parameters you can work with as well. You have your filter modes. You have chorus and delay and reverb. You have the amplifier. And you can automate any of those parameters with a LFO or an envelope in basically whatever way you want without having to go through the mods. Plus you have the instrument table, which lets you articulate and transpose and mess with things in a little bit more programmatic of a way, where you get like step-based control over the exact numbers you're punching in. And that can lead to some really cool sounds without having to grind out a bunch of note entry. In situations where you want really fine control over the voicing of a chord or the precise way that it sounds like, then round robin is honestly fine. There is one more thing you can do, and that is resampling, and it pairs nicely with the internal MIDI feature. So I've got some piano chords here that are sequenced on one channel, but when I play it, you're going to see them spread out over the other 7 open channels. The instrument I'm using to do this is the MIDI out instrument, and I'm directing it to the internal port because this thing is both a MIDI send and a MIDI receive device. So it's receiving its own MIDI. In my project settings, I have MIDI set to tracks 2 through 8. They're all listening on channel 1 and triggering instrument A. And instrument A is this piano sample. I can slide this directly into a song and it will behave in a somewhat reasonable way, but obviously the fewer open channels you have, the worse the results are going to be. So what we can do is highlight this range and render it to a sample. Now with that rendered, we have it set on instrument 11. So we're going to make some new chains, fill them with empty phrases. Instrument 11 here. We're going to disable transpose on this because I have the project transposed, and if I double transpose it, it's going to sound really gross. And with just that simple shortcut, we can condense anything that we can play on the M8 in 8 channels down to a single channel sample that we can trigger wherever in the project we want.